Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Good morning from the true heart of Tennessee, folks, Sevier County, and the gateway to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Made it home safely last Monday afternoon and have thoroughly enjoyed spending the week at home with my bride and my puppy. Today, we're kicking off something special, part one of a three-part series discussing the lie that the two major political parties are truly different, and possibly a way out of the mess our republic is in right now. And who better to dive into this with us than Mr. Adam Brandon, the powerhouse behind the Independent Center and a veteran of the fight for freedom. Adam's been in the arena, folks, battling for smaller government and individual liberty for nearly 2 decades at FreedomWorks, the engine behind the Tea Party movement. Starting in 2005 in their press shop, he didn't just sit back. He rose to be president, steering a family of organizations from think tanks to political action committees. Under his leadership, FreedomWorks rallied millions to demand lower taxes, less government, and more freedom. Y'all remember the Tea Party? Adam helped spark it, organizing the massive 9/12 taxpayer march on Washington in 2009 and driving the election of heavyweights like Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, and Ted Cruz. A Brigham Young University study even found FreedomWorks endorsements were the only ones that mattered in the 2010 elections. That's real impact. But Adam's not just about wins, he's about ideas. He championed entitlement reform, free trade, and keeping government out of your business. When populism shook things up, he stayed true, rebranding FreedomWorks in 2023 to reach independent voters with a message of tolerance and fiscal sanity. Even after FreedomWorks closed in 2024, Adam's mission didn't stop. Now, with the Independent Center, he's rallying millennials and Gen Z to reject the two-party trap and embrace principled independence. With a resume as a campaign manager, high school teacher, press secretary, and degrees from George Washington University, Georgetown, and Jagiellon University in Poland, Adam's got the grit and the brains to lead the charge. In this first of 3 episodes, we're digging into the myth that the two major parties are opposites. Spoiler alert, they're often 2 sides of the same big government coin. Adam's here to break it down from his Tea Party days to his vision for a freer future. So grab your sweet tea or your coffee and let's get in to take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, with Mr. Adam Brandon. Here we go. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Mr. Adam Brandon. He's from the Independent Center. And Mr. Brandon, can you just give us a little bit of your background before we get into some of the topics?
Yeah, I would love to. I appreciate this opportunity. It's always fantastic. I keep telling people, and I think I told you when we started, this is the future of media. And one of the reasons I believe it is because we get to have a conversation. If I was going on a television show, I'd have 2 minutes, of which the host would have 1 minute, and we actually get to sink into some subjects. So I'm just thrilled to talk to your audience. But who am I? I'm just a regular guy from Cleveland who grew up, but I grew up in the 90s And I kind of saw from my background, my mother was incredibly liberal, and my father was an evangelical Christian. So I grew up in a household where it was the politics couldn't get any further apart. So in some respects, I kind of, I picked up some things from both of my parents, but I kind of ended up falling into this more limited government, more libertarian style. I believe in the smallest government you could possibly have. At the same time, I'm very optimistic about what the country can be and who we are as a people. And but my number one concern for most of my career, starting in the 90s when I was in college, was the size and scope of this debt and deficit. So I remember studying back in the 90s when things were being balanced. And I remember my professors were teaching me, but the country's really in trouble. You get to the 2030s, and this is one of the most predictable debt crises that we're ever going to have, and it's happening. And there's a great book. There's several books that point out when a nation starts to spend more on interest on its debt than its military, whether you're ancient Rome, ancient Greece, you're the French Empire before the French Revolution. You're the Spanish Empire after all that gold and silver they brought in from the Americas. Whether you're Britain in the British Empire, the minute you start spending more on servicing your debt than your military, you're over. You're done. And guess what? This year, we started spending more on interest payments than our military. So I think folks are running out of time. And to me, before I was at the Independence Center, I've spent 20 years at the grassroots group Freedom Works, 10 of which I was doing communications work, and 10 of which I served as president. And frankly, when I look back on my time, I'm very proud of my time there, but it just wasn't up to the challenge of solving the debt crisis. And that's why I'm here. That's why I work in this industry. But what I found out at the end is that the independent voters, particularly the younger voters in America, people under age 45, are acutely aware of this debt situation. They're the ones who are going to be the ones dealing with it and paying for it. And they want to see some answers. And frankly, I'm just kind of done with Republican and Democrat politics. I'm a debt and deficit guy. I'm going to focus on that issue. That's what brought me to the Independence Center.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think we're along the same lines because I think the topic of this interview is the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast is the lies, and one of the biggest lies that I think the American people believe in today is that the Republicans and Democrats are vastly different parties.
Oh, I learned that the hard way, my friend.
Right.
I was writing something this morning. My organization, Freedom Works, grew rapidly. Was two lessons I had from the Tea Party movement. And the first lesson I have from the Tea Party movement that I share with people is at the very beginning, it was protesting George Bush, a Republican, for the TARP bailouts and spending. It then quickly moved to be a very effective challenging Obama. And what we saw was this massive government overreach. And remember, we were complaining about like 20 executive orders.
Right.
Okay? So you put that, but then what happened is that after some initial successes in 2010 and all, and heading into 2011, the Republican powers that be kind of took over the Tea Party movement, kind of corrupted it, and turned it into an auxiliary unit of the GOP. And at that moment, it lost everything special. And so I am determined to make sure that this new effort that I want to be part of starting a movement on spending, that it's not going to get corrupted by either party. We're going to hold people accountable. And then back to that point, you go back to President Obama's reelection in 2016. Before that election, just a few months before that election, passing the House and the Senate, Republican House and the Senate, was a very good Obamacare repeal law. It was passed. Now, 4 months later, when Donald Trump was elected president, I verified this. It was such a the parliamentarians said if they would just change a couple of the dates and a few things, it would take about 5 minutes of changes, they could have put that same repeal bill in front of Donald Trump, day one of his presidency. So after campaigning on Obama, rejecting it, the minute they had the opportunity to do it, that was it. What? Obamacare? Repeal? What? No, we weren't talking about that. And at that point, it hurt me. It upset me. I felt like Lucy in the frickin' football. And I felt like I was used and I felt like a chump. Here that I was working my butt, being serious on this issue of repealing Obamacare. And I thought all these meetings, I was the only one in the room who felt that way. And so I know this hurts a lot of my friends' feelings when I said I just cannot take the Republican Party seriously on spending. But after having a career of these experiences, I just think we're running out of time, and we got to take the punch bowl away from the Republicans and the Democratic Party and actually start legislating based on what Americans want. And what Americans want is us to fix some of these debt and deficit problems so we can get back to being a great nation.
Absolutely. So, first question is, can you share what the Independent Center's core mission and how it empowers the independent voters to champion liberty and hold politicians accountable, especially like states like Tennessee, where we have a Republican supermajority here,
Right.
and the budget has increased by 59% over the last 6 years.
Look, I mentioned I come from Ohio. It's a single party state. And I can't tell you they govern like Republicans.
No.
Show me. Frankly, going back to when I mentioned the 90s, possibly the best governance in my lifetime was Bill Clinton as president, Newt Gingrich as the Speaker of the House. And, they fought like dogs, and I'm sure they hate each other to this day. But man, they got good legislation done. We had a budget surplus. We did welfare reform. I mean, you could go through a lot of these different issues. The way that they managed the rise of the internet, they allowed for the technology to just explode and create tremendous amounts of American leadership and wealth. Like there was a lot to go. So I don't mind two parties battling it out if they figure out ways to where they can compromise and come together for a positive piece of legislation. And I also know, given the fact this is a center-right country, it's still going to be, your legislation, even after compromise isn't about abandoning principle. To me, compromise is about, okay, here's what I need, and I can't take this. This is what you need. You can't take this. If we have an area where we agree, that's where we legislate from, and we'll come back tomorrow and fight about the rest of it. But you keep the things moving forward. So what the Independent Center is looking to do is some basic numbers. There's 435 congressional districts in the United States. Only 25 are competitive. That's it. And I start thinking, why am I spending all this time thinking about 435 congressional districts when there's 25 that if you have an influence in those 25 districts, you are going to set the tone. So to me, when you look at those 25 districts, they tend to be suburban, they tend to be dominated by millennials, and they tend to be independent focused. So the idea here is if you start organizing just in those 25 districts, that you would be able to send to Washington, hypothetically, 5 or 6 independent elected folks. And these people that we would recruit, their lives would be better outside of politics than inside. So the idea is, Mr. Anesthesiologist, Miss Small Business Owner, please just take 2 or 4 years off of your career. Come to Washington, govern honestly, stay away from the parties, stay away from the lobbyists, and go home.
That's been a big problem. We've turned this volunteer position into a career.
And then in my experience in DC, what I have witnessed is how it gets built around it. But the way the system propagates itself is convincing you that is, okay, you may be disappointed in Republicans, you may be disappointed in Democrats, but the other side is really bad. So we practice negative partisanship, which all that allows is for our, people we believe in, it gives them an excuse. So we were just in Michigan doing, because there's a lot going on in Michigan right now. And when we talk to independent voters and even Republican and Democrat voters in these different focus groups, what they told us is that the number one value they saw in this project that we're launching is holding parties accountable. So when Republicans say they want to cut spending, we can get up there and say, did you cut spending? When Democrats get up there and make some promise, did you do that? And having an independent voice allows you to do that. And then all these debt and spending issues, what my hope would be is they would come to power. You got 5 or 6 of these folks. You have to have 218 votes as speaker. If you can deny either party of creating those 218, those 5 can then get into a more of a European style coalition government. And what they can demand is they can demand lots of things on process reforms that allow us the opportunity to finally start working on spending. And so that to me is the only way we're going to do that is because by the way, hypothetically, you start doing this, Republicans would all of a sudden realize overnight, well, maybe we actually do have to keep our campaign promises on spending. And then when the Democrats see all of this energy and they're losing votes to this group, maybe they have to be, maybe they should talk about less woke and maybe they should talk about more about how they're solving these crises. And so that's what I think could happen. Remember, independents are 50% of the population. We give independents the voice. We focus on some of these issues, healthcare reform, spending reform, other types of electoral reform. You actually create a base to actually drive change. And you don't have to redo a constitution in the system. We actually can work within the current system.
Absolutely. So, but there's a mindset shift that's got to happen there because when I first ran for the Tennessee State House, I ran as an independent.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see that I instead of a D or an R after somebody's name on a ballot, that automatically triggers in most voters' minds, well, that's gonna split the vote and we're not
Spoiler,
right.
yeah, or hyper disruptive. That's the two things I deal with all the time.
Well, I think they knew I was definitely hyper disruptive.
Well, God bless you for running as an independent. I appreciate that as an American citizen that you had the guts to do that. But what I will say is it is changed. What is different this time is when we look at the data, the millennial voters, those under age 45, actually those under age 43, really, they're majority independent already. And so it's really the people born after 1986 that we see on our data are the ones who are most likely to be independent. So the thing is, you were just ahead of your time, unfortunately, but the time is coming. But I'll also be clear, this does not, with the plan I'm pitching right now, it only works in a handful of districts and states right now.
Right.
We are going to be working on the California gubernatorial race. There's a fantastic gentleman running there as an independent, and he's going to be running on issues such as energy, bringing nuclear power, increasing natural gas so that you can have a transition to a carbon-free future. At the same time, you're not bankrupting your state and trying to run an economy on windmills. He's going to focus on issues that people care about, like housing affordability and allowing builders to build things within reason. I mean, we're not saying we're going to go build apartments in Yosemite. No one is saying that. But you've got a lot of brownfields in places like California that you should make it very easy to build high rises and things like that. So there's going to be races there. There's going to be, I know the governor's race in Michigan. I know of 3 or 4 independents running for Senate right now and a lot in the House. So it's like this ballot on 26, you're going to have more independents on the ballot. Now, a lot of them are going to be in districts they have no chance at winning. What I'm talking about are finding candidates in these districts that are plurality or majority independent. Honestly, California is one of those probably, or will be one of those, because your choice is between the left or the far left. And we're saying, how about this? It's not the far right, maybe Goldilocks.
Another option.
Yeah. And so we think by giving that, that's going, and then all of a sudden across the country, when people see these people who are getting elected and they're like, oh my goodness, I want one of those in my district too. I want that type of person I'm talking to a guy who like rescued American children and overseas places. And it's like, I want this guy to represent me. Like this guy's got the moral fortitude and the guts. So we're finding incredible candidates like that. And I think it's just this is a movement. And once we get it started in this cycle, we'll come back and we'll talk about the presidential race. And I think if just a handful of independents get elected this cycle, it'll totally change everything we're talking about in the presidential race.
Oh, right. Because it'll definitely shift the demographic on who they have to go appeal to.
Right.
And, appealing to people that are going to want to save the country. Because again, yeah, like we mentioned or we talked about earlier, the debt is going to kill the country.
That's what it is. We know this.
Right.
Like we know this. And I get kind of emotional about this because sometimes I think about, guys who died in the Civil War, just, dying on a battlefield 3 days, bleeding out for this country. I think of guys who, we've all seen, Saving Private Ryan, guys holding their intestines, crying for their mother on a beach someplace, dying. Like, does our politics respect the sacrifice that those individuals made? No. I want to actually be able to look those those soldiers or people in service today, the people who are on the barricades in Afghanistan getting blown up. Like, I want to be able to look at their families. I want to be able to look at those types of soldiers. I was very moved once by a young man I saw who had no arms at a baseball game in Baltimore, and he had his military, awards on him. And it's like, that guy's never gonna be able to hold his own baby. I want to do this for people like that and give them a country. It's like, my sacrifice, it sucks that, but you know what? When I look at this country and what I contributed to, It was worth it. But right now, I don't feel our politics, we could go to anyone and say your sacrifice was worth it. I mean, in that sense, I mean, I think we're disappointing our servicemen and women, and I take that personally. So I think that we're giving this an opportunity to fire people, give people hope. The people I work with on a day-to-day basis, if you went to work with us, we're actually laughing, we're joking, we're having fun, and we're optimistic we're going to solve this problem. There's no doomsayers saying around we're screwed. We all know we're screwed, but we also know we have an opportunity to fix it, but we got to put our partisan politics aside for a little bit.
Absolutely. So, my podcast focuses on threats to the constitutional republic.
Yeah.
A lot of them are insider threats now. Most of them are insider threats.
Yes.
Just the debt is the biggest. But what do you think are the biggest challenges to individual liberty today?
Okay, this is probably an answer you're not thinking about, or people haven't talked about. But our system, when you look at that Constitution, how it was designed, Congress has possibly the most important job.
It does.
Not the White House, not the Supreme Court, Congress. And Congress is not a functioning body. So you are never going to, and so I worry, you may love a lot of the executive orders that President Trump is doing right now. I mean, there's a lot of them I love. But the problem is, this is the new floor. The next president who comes in is going to take these powers and 10x them. So hypothetically, using some of like I pointed this out to my family who really liked, when some people in the Trump White House were talking about weakening the Fifth Amendment, I'm like, well, you're Second Amendment folks. You do understand when the next people come in, they may go after your amendment too. So you got to be very careful when you start gutting amendments, because the ones that are important to you, they may be next to fall. And so, but I look at it, Congress needs to do its job. Well, how does Congress do its job? Weren't we all told, and I don't want to be beating up on Republicans right now, but I know they're in power. So it's, but they ran on regular order. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Lucci and the football, guess when they were due? They were due, they were due just a couple of days ago, basically. The end of June, they were supposed to have these bills in. Do you know how many they had done?
No.
0. They didn't even try. Didn't even try. And the reason, and this is the threat. Here in DC, we have a phrase called the four corners. Did you ever hear that phrase?
No.
Okay, here's some knowledge I'm going to be dropping right now. But this is the insider slimy stuff. The four corners means there's only 4 people who matter in Congress: the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate, and the Minority Leader. That is it. Okay? That's it. So, and the reason is that that's where we all get up there and give speeches and pay attention and talk about legislation. These 2,000, 5,000 page bills, they don't get crafted overnight. They're busy doing them right now. And they're going to let the process get to the point where we're running out of time and there's this crisis because we're going to have a shutdown. And they use that crisis to pass these giant, it starts with an S sandwich bills that everyone then says it's a terrible bill, but I had to vote for it. Look, if Congress would actually go through the bills in proper order, you wouldn't have this. You would empower individual members. You would empower committee chairmen. You would empower people to make amendments to make this possible. You would force debate, and then you would force some compromises. And those compromises, again, compromise doesn't mean giving up on your principles. It means fighting like hell for your principle, but making a deal where my principle is so important and you're really important on this one. And we get these two things through because, and unfortunately, most compromise I know in Washington has been, well, you get what you want, you get what I want. We just spend a lot more money and pass this to future taxpayers. That's not the compromise I'm talking about. I'm talking about the compromise that is like, we're going to set priorities.
Yeah, but
these are the priorities that are the most important. And okay, can we agree on these priorities? Okay, let's go. So then we get through 10 of those appropriations bills. I know it's boring, it's not sexy, but you get through those 10 appropriations bills, and then you have an omnibus with only 3 bills left. Okay, I'm not going to complain about that. But you got to start doing the work to empower the individual members. And once Congress starts doing its job again, then it can do the oversight. Because my concern about Trump stripping a lot of the power out of the bureaucracy right now is that power should have been pushed back over to the Congress, or it should have been pushed back to the states, or it should just pushed back to individuals, right? But when you move this power from the bureaucrats to just further centralizing it in the White House, what that means is the next president's going to be able to do some pretty awful things with that power. So again, Congress needs to do its oversight, and for that, Congress needs to function. And for that to work, I think you need to break this power struggle system of the 4 corners.
Well, that'll wrap up part one, folks. Be sure and join us next week as we continue this lively discussion. Also, here's the weekly reminder about the annual Freedom Festival being put on by the Tennessee Constitutional Grassroots Coalition. It is scheduled for October 4th in Loudon, Tennessee. There are a bunch of great speakers and entertainers lined up for your enjoyment. For more information, visit their website. It is tcgc1776.org. Again, that is tcgc1776.org. I also want to give a shout out to the most conservative legislator in the state of Tennessee and a prior guest on this program, Representative Jody Barrett, for his decision to take a stand in a bigger arena by throwing his hat in the ring to run for retiring Congressman Mark Green's seat in an upcoming special election. He is one of many candidates that have declared their candidacy, but I believe he is the best fit to represent Tennessee in the U.S. Congress. He, alongside Congressman Tim Burchett, can bring some straightforward, conservative Tennessee values to that den of vipers in Washington, D.C. In closing, this week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from the book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom, chapter 4, verses 25 through 27. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Make level paths for your feet and take only ways that are firm. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. For far too long now, Americans have bought into the lie that we need to go right or left along with the political parties when the truth is they have both strayed away from constitutional governance and have exchanged our liberty for their personal gain. There is a better way, but it takes all of us to get involved. Our national debt is going to destroy our country and our freedoms along with it unless we act. Be sure and tune in for part 2 of our discussion. Until next week, Reveille, it's time to wake up.